There it is.
Friday should be enjoying the fact that it's still called Friday.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This that you're looking at here is an article that appeared in a fairly popular German newspaper this past summer. The headline reads in English, "Jewish Children, My Class, Who Survived?" And I'll come back to that in a few moments. This past January, I received at my office an email with the subject line, "Questions about Paul Nussbaum." My father, Paul, was born in Munich, Germany in 1928, came to the U.S. in 1939, and died in 1997. So it struck me as somewhat odd that I was being asked in 2024 questions about my father who died 27 years before that. Reading the email gave me a bit of the chills. The sender, a young man named Derek Lesho, wrote, quote, "I'm a student at the Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich, Germany, and as part of a class we are researching the stories of the former students of the Jüdische Volksschule," he says in parentheses, Jewish school here in Munich, led by Karl Sussheim in the 1930s, based off of a class photo from the spring of 1937, on which it seems your father, Paul Nussbaum, appears. I then found you through your father's obituary in the Washington Post. End quote from the email. This photo from the German newspaper was the photograph that Derek was referring to, and my father is number 34 in that picture, in second row. Here's the whole story. Christina Miltz is a historian at the Institute of Contemporary History in Munich, Germany. And she was writing a dissertation on the late Karl Sussheim, a very prominent German Jewish scholar. Christina happened to find this photograph lying loose among the documents in Dr. and Professor Sussheim's estate, and on the back, Sussheim had written the names of all the students by number, including his daughter, who's number 16 in this picture. By the way, the teacher in the back, I think number 1 in the back left, is Henry Kissinger's great-uncle Ferdinand. How about that? Christina published her book on Sussheim in 2022, but she says that the photo haunted her after that, and she asked herself what had become of all the children. In the fall of 2023, with another historian in Munich and 13 university students, she began her research. Together, they managed to trace the lives of the 48 children in the photo, some with more detail than others. Ironically, Derek, who sent me the email and who was the student assigned to research my father, is an American student who lives in Northern Virginia and attends school in Munich, and his father grew up in Ellicott City. Very strange. Many years ago, I had conducted and had transcribed a tape-recorded interview with my father. So I sent a copy of the transcript to Munich along with some other documents and photographs that my brother and I found in my parents' house. My mother died almost 3 years ago, so sadly we weren't able to ask either of them for more information about all the items that we found, and I'm going to talk about that later too. One of the items that we found but never knew about was a journal that my father kept in German starting in September 1939 after he came to Baltimore until March 14, 1941 when his father died. It's not very long, but it was written in this flowing German script, so I wasn't able to make out the words, let alone translate it into English. We sent a copy of that document to Munich, and the researchers who were working on this project translated it and returned it to us. Now, in the very front of the journal is a photograph that with my father, who's on the left there, and 3 of his school friends, Martin Sandbank, Bertel Sandbank, and Eva Balin, who he identified by name. That's his handwriting above it. The first entry in his journal from September 28, 1939, in Baltimore, says that he received the journal from his friend Berta Sandbank while he was still in Munich, who, quote, "Unfortunately, due to these dark times, I haven't heard anything from, but deep down I still hope to see her again. Who knows?" Question mark with an end of quote. Later, he identifies Berta in his journal as his girlfriend, and he wonders if she, quote, "is in Palestine. Who knows?" He says. On New Year's Day, 1941, his journal notes, wrote to Bertel. Tragically and sadly, the researchers on this project had discovered that 11 of the students in that photograph were murdered in the Holocaust, including my father's 3 friends. 10 of those students were forced onto the first deportation train to leave Munich in November 1941. The train was diverted to Kaunas, Lithuania. The passengers were taken to Fort 9, where they were all shot on the spot, including Ferdinand Kissinger, who we talked about earlier. Berta, my father's friend here, was later deported and murdered in Poland. Sharon and I were in Europe for 2 weeks in September for another reason, and we had the amazing good fortune to go to Munich for a day to visit with Christina and Derek. Although Christina is not Jewish, she is very passionate about her project, and she hopes to write a book and do an exhibition in Munich in the next few years. Her office, these are two different walls that come together, are like a scene from a movie or TV show where detectives are trying to piece together a great mystery and are looking at all these different photographs. So she has photographs of not all, but many of the 48 kids who they're researching. These were the pictures that we sent of my father and his brother and his mother, and his father too. Students ended up, according to the researchers, all over the world, including here in the U.S. and in Israel. Remarkably, 2 of the students from the picture are still alive in their late 90s, one living in Tel Aviv and the other in Seattle. One of the women wrote the words that are in the newspaper that I showed you at the beginning, where she said, "My class, who survived?" One of the students emigrated to Palestine with his parents and later became the Israeli ambassador to Liberia. 5 escaped to England on kinder transports, 15 came to the U.S., 7 to Israel, and others to Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, and Australia. While we were in Munich, they took us to see the apartment building where my father, his older brother, and his parents lived until they left Europe in the spring of 1939. It's now an office building, but we were able to go to up to the floor where the apartment was, and I could sort of envision the history that was all around us when we went up there. Christina's the one in the middle, Derek is the one in the end, and I'll talk about the man in the green sweater in a minute. After Kristallnacht in November of 1938, my grandfather was taken to Dachau, where he remained in prison for several weeks. He was released in December. He was released because he was a World War II veteran, and the family at that time concluded they needed to leave Germany. As some of you may know, the problem for German Jews at that time was not leaving Germany, it was trying to find someplace that would let them in. My father and his family were studying Spanish for a while because they thought they'd be moving to Uruguay. They were also considering Shanghai, which was open at that time. Fortunately, a cousin of theirs had obtained a golden ticket from a U.S. consulate to get here, so they were able to enter into the United States. When my father's family left Germany in the spring of 1939, his father insisted on going first to Italy to say goodbye to other members of his family before leaving Europe altogether. They were then to go to Switzerland, fly to England, and then by ship to America. Apparently, they were caught in a catch-22 situation between the British and the Americans, who would each issue visas only after the other one did. In the transcript with my father I talked about earlier, my father mentioned that after the Jewish school was closed after Kristallnacht, he was tutored at home by a non-Jewish family friend named Maria Schwingenstein. The tutor's family apparently knew the Cardinal of Munich at the time, Michael von Faulhaber, who, according to my father, interceded and somehow was able to get the visa situation straightened out. Unfortunately, I'm not sure of any of the details, but I do believe that without that assistance, they would not have gotten out of Europe. When we met Christina in Munich last month, she did an amazing thing for us. The man here in the green sweater and here behind Sharon and me at lunch is the grandson of that woman, Maria. And here's the picture that he showed us of her. He knew that she was an activist and knew that she had helped Jewish families, but he didn't know anything about what she did for my father's family. Being in Munich and talking with all 3 of these people was an absolutely amazing, remarkable experience. I mentioned earlier about items found in my parents' house, and I want to get back to that. After cleaning up my parents' house, one of the great regrets in my life was not talking with both of them about all the stuff that they had accumulated from their past. In addition to the journal I talked about, we found dozens and dozens of photographs with people that I can no longer identify, and other fascinating documents, mostly from my father's days in Germany, but some from my mother's side. And these two German war medals. One, I think, was for my father, who served in the German army during World War I, and the other, I think, went to my grandmother, who did something to assist the army outside of the military, but I'm not sure. I think that's what it is. In doing some Googling for this talk, and those of you who know me well know that I Google everything, I came upon an article from a March 2023 a website in reformjudaism.org, and I want to credit the author, Rabbi Maya Glasser, whom I don't know. But the article is titled, quote, "The Importance of Storytelling." And it starts by noting that, quote, "Jewish people love to share stories, as memory is a central Jewish value. We cannot forget what has happened to us because we must share it with future generations. The past is one of our best learning tools," end quote. She notes that we continue to remember and share difficult parts of our people's story because the difficult parts are also part of our history, and we should not only discuss happy memories or what brings us pride, but also the challenging parts that we'd prefer to shy away from. She concludes in her article that we are a storytelling people, and in every generation we strive to share our tradition and heritage, even the uncomfortable parts. Here's what I want to leave with everyone today. If you have grandchildren or grandchildren and you haven't done so already, please make sure you go over all your family stuff with them while you still can and share all of your family stories. They may not appreciate it now, but they will in the future. Go over everything. Show them your pictures. Identify the people. Explain the circumstances. Talk about all the family memorabilia. Write stuff down. And if your parents or grandparents are still around, make sure you find time to sit down with them and get the stories that they have that they will share with you. Waiting will only bring questions and possibly regrets later. I hope that this talk will be an inspiration of sorts to each of you to engage in storytelling with your families. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova, and happy anniversary, Sharon.